This episode is exclusively sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim.
Welcome to At the Meeting. My name is Monse Torremorey, and I have with me Dr. Tom Quetzal and Dr. Gordon Sprung. Hi, Tom. Hi, Gordon. How are you?
Very good, Monse. Looking forward to recording here.
Great, Monse. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, Tom.
Good morning.
Very good. So today we want to talk about PRRS control and elimination, right? One of those topics that never goes away, but we want to take a slightly different spin than in past episodes. We want to talk about what's next for the U.S. In terms of how do we go advancing PRRS control and elimination. And to have that discussion with us, we have a very distinguished guest with us. We have Dr. Scott D., who is a practitioner, researcher, certainly a field shaper in the area of PRRS control and PRRS prevention. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Monse. Hi, everybody. Thanks for bringing me on board again.
Scott, good to see you. We were just talking before we went on the recording here that the first time we had a at the meeting recording with you, you looked a lot younger than as we did also. That we've been doing this for over 25 years, and here we are talking about the same subject with you that we did over 25 years ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember those early recordings. It's been fun to be involved since the beginning, but I think it's exciting today because we have so much to say.
Yeah, so, Scott, when I look at your professional career, and many of the people are out there, I can actually not think of anybody who's been as consequential as you have been in terms of your research and what you've shared out of those investigations that really have shaped how the industry has adapted many of the practices. So I would like to start the recording with you in some way. Give us an overview, in your view, where we are with PRRS after this 20-something or 30 years almost that you've been researching PRRS or dealing with PRRS. Where are we, in your view?
Well, we're not very far down the road. When you think about it, all the work that's been done and looking at the Morrison report that I know was developed with some people on this recording long ago. It's a marvelous metric. You can look at PRRS over a large base of the system in the United States. We're not doing a very good job for quite many years now. I have a little different spin now, but looking at those data, wouldn't be very impressed if you just looked at it over time without some knowledge of what's coming down the road.
So if you could help us summarize what are some of those major achievements that we've done, I would argue that it's true that from an incidence perspective, we have a lot of disease yet. We would like to see that incidence lower. But at the same time, I believe we've made progress because we have, I think we do a better job controlling PRRS and preventing many of the PRRS breaks, but still we have a lot. I agree with that. So in your view, Scott, what are those main achievements that we've done on PRRS control collectively and part driven by your research that really have helped change that incidence when those steps have been implemented well?
I think the big achievement that really turned the corner has been our ability to control area spread. Because, Monse, I remember when you and your PIC team eliminated PRRS from the system, the PIC company. For the first time, we had negative genetics. But we quickly learned, and you kind of pioneered understanding of, we can populate a farm negative, but it'll get infected again, and we don't know how the virus gets into that farm. And we called that area spread. And that was a real Achilles heel for producers into let's work together to get rid of it kind of mindset. So I give a lot of credit to you and your team for helping us. All those years ago, it started with negative genetics and negative semen, because if we can't, without that, we're in big trouble.
we never even had to worry about MSHMP reports back in those first days with PRRS, just from a historical standpoint, because everything was positive. I mean, honestly, there was practically no negative stock anymore around from the fact that we couldn't get negative genetics to start with. So everything was getting infected and getting new viruses.
It was to be accepted as an endemic virus, much like parvovirus is endemic in
that was the hope.
Underlying virus that's there, but with no or little production impact. Well, we soon discovered that didn't work. Yeah. And so not only did vendors supply us with negative gilts, then we could eliminate the virus from the farms. That's certainly elimination techniques, Scott, I think would be a milestone. And then every time a new pathway was discovered of transmission, a new intervention was put into place, rolling up into many pathways and many interventions that we currently know about. Aren't those the big milestones, Scott?
For sure. That's why I would go exactly down that path. We eliminate, we couldn't keep it out. Now we can keep it out. We've got data, we've published it, we've shown that it can be done, and we understand how the virus is spreading around, and we've got biosecurity protocols, like you said, that are validated. So it's evidence-based. The whole approach to biosecurity is now evidence-based instead of kind of a salesman pitch, or buy this and it'll keep PRRS out, or use this and it'll keep PRRS out. It's a much more scientific approach, and that's why we've had so much success in the recent past controlling the viral entry.
I actually, Scott, I want to reflect a little bit on your research and certainly give you credit about all the understanding of the indirect routes of transmission of PRRS. First with transport, again, some very basic research you did with the snowball of hell, I don't know exactly how you frame it, that show, again, so easy the virus could transmit. So the transport and then people and moving things around. So to me, that was something that's changed the way how we use biosecurity protocols in the industry. But then the work on aerosol, after all that debate, right? We still debate nowadays, does it get transmitted or not? The reality is it happens, right? Depending on where you are located. I mean, and the data on the farms that use air filtration, plus obviously the rest of biosecurity measures, incidence is lower. I would argue that at least in these areas of high density, that really has changed incidence of infections in the sow farms. Maybe we haven't done enough to take it to the grow finish. That's a different discussion. But maybe I would say, and you, Scott, and Gordon, yourself, in your system, maybe you want to share some of how is that working, or how, in your view, has really changed how you address PRRS control?
I think you're building a nice argument for using what we call next generation biosecurity, which again is evidence-based, because you're talking about the pillars that we've described for that process, a comprehensive science-based approach. Pillar one is genetics. You start with negative genetics and negative semen. Then you move to the mechanical interventions like you described, transport, people entry, supply entry. Then you move to aerosol. You talk about filtration. The one that's missing is the feed. That's pillar 4 in the next generation diagram. And we do know that this virus can be spread through feed. We don't know the frequency of the event. We don't know how long it will live and things like that. But it can happen. We've confirmed that in the field and the laboratory. So if you take all 4 of those pillars and you put it together, that's why I'm so excited about the future of PRRS control, because we know how to keep it out. That's always been our weakness.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, Scott, is over the years, it's I like to look at it as like we built this foundation of, okay, here's one, we know area spread is an issue, like you first mentioned, and then we built building blocks from that. And you had a lot to do with, and sometimes it was kind of like overwhelming as a practitioner. Scott would come out, Gordon and Monsi, with a piece of information like, well, if you're within this distance of other pigs, you're going to move that virus. I mean, your work you did on your first research farm with that was landmark work. And then all of a sudden, Scott said, well, wait a minute, we're finding out that the flies have it too. And the snowball from hell that you talked about, Monsi. And so it becomes a little bit overwhelming, because this virus has so many methods of entry compared to a lot of disease pathogens that we've dealt with in the past. And yet we're building those blocks now. And like you said, I think we're at a point now, you guys, where we know what to do. It's just it's execution, right? The missing piece in many of the cases. We still see it in the MSHMP report this year that we aren't changing incidence rates whatsoever here. The way it looks to me is execution.
Exactly.
Well, to use different words, Scott, I could do all the things you just described and have next generation biosecurity implemented, but yet I still get PRRS. What do you say to that skeptic?
Well, I'd go into that farm and I look at this checklist you have in your head about all of these pillars. Are you doing all of these things correctly? And then you'd go through each of them and look at the protocols they're using and look at the logs and audit those logs and be sure that things are done right. I think you look at the culture of the farm and see how biosecurity has been built into the mindset of workers. How do they respect biosecurity? Do they really believe that what we're doing works, or is it just inconvenience? Are they rewarded for properly taking the time to conduct the protocols correctly? I look deep into the culture of the farm and first make sure they're doing things right. For example, they're using disinfectants correctly at the right dose, they've got the right filters, they've got the right feed mitigants, all those things. But to Gordon, what you've always showed me is you got to get the culture of the farm on the right page, or no matter what you do, it's not going to help. So I'd pay close attention to just the people, the body language, the responses that people make when you start asking them questions, or as you used to do so very nicely, give tests and see what the answers to some of these questions were based on situational challenges. What do you do if the guy drives in the farm and walks in the door? Those types of things. I remember you doing that. That was really cool.
Yeah. And that's right, Scott. And so here's my concern. I agree with you of what has to happen at the farm level. It seems like we need to change the culture of the national industry right now. The culture of what I would simply put as a live with this endemic disease or this virus, as opposed to now our competitors. Brazil, no PRRS, or Hungary, eliminated PRRS. Denmark on a pathway of elimination of PRRS. Yeah. How do we speak to the culture of the national industry to change that attitude about this endemic virus that we've had now for not more than 30 years, Monty and Tom, 35 years, running on 40 years maybe. So,
put that another way, Gordon. It's like we still have a mindset in a good part of the industry that goes back to what the genetic companies were saying early on, is that it's everywhere. We can't do anything about it. And therefore, for us to eliminate it, we're just going to get it back right away. And so that I think draws people away from this whole idea of we don't have to live with this virus.
Hey, Tom, but we get it back because we behave the same way we've always behaved. So we get the results we always get.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I like the concept of the culture at the regional level or at the industrial level, because that goes beyond your farm. Right? I mean, because I think the part that we haven't really talked about now, it's the grow finish. I think we do a very good job in the South Farm, but remember, these are not BSL-2 or BSL-3 facilities. So there is only so much we can do with the best biosecurity we have. And we have some of these viruses that are very infectious. I mean, some of these new strains, infectious dose is very small. So in some way, we have to have tools or ways to also decrease that pressure of infection outside the farm. And I'm thinking the grow finish in this case, or the transport. So I think to me, the culture part comes to look beyond your farm, which requires the buy-in of the industry, right?
But this is where we haven't. I agree with what Gordon. This whole idea of that national level. We've tried regional PRRS elimination programs, right? We've went down that path before, and honestly, I don't know if there's any of those that have been successful. Now, I think they've improved communications, and in some cases, they probably reduced the incidence rate that's occurring in some areas where the farmers and producers are talking more and sharing information when they get an outbreak that occurs. But the reality is, what our idea was with regional programs was that we were going to eliminate virus from those regions.
So, Scott, about 10 minutes ago, you said it's important to have something to say. So what do you say about all this at the national industry level in regards to PRRS? What say you?
at the national industry level, I think the industry needs to understand that we can keep this virus out of farms. And so this issue of area spread has been solved. So that's number one. Number two, how do we work together on a broader scale? I think U.S. SHIP is a great opportunity to work together. It's already getting set up for foreign animal diseases. Why not expand it into domestic disease and start certifying farms for different levels of, PRRS control, PRRS elimination, PED elimination. I think that talk has already started. But I think one of the things we have now that we didn't have in the past is U.S. SHIP, which is a much more coordinated approach of the industry. So to me, that's a great opportunity to change the culture, not just at the farm level, but across the United States.
I think I'd agree with that, Scott, that that pathway has potential to not only certainly help us on the international pathogens, ASF, hog cholera, foot and mouth, and it's actually intended for that, but it could easily be an endemic tool for the producers at a national scale to improve our industry. Because I think the other thing that's changing, Monse, you mentioned that the virus is changing. One could argue it's more severe and it moves differently, but you could also argue that our competitors are changing. And while the national industry used to compete against the Europeans, our focus is now toward maybe South America and Brazil. Well, they do not have this virus. And so we need to pay attention that their competitiveness somewhat is based on their lower finishing mortality. And this is something that our industry needs to pay attention to.
Yeah, certainly there is an advantage by being PRRS negative, right? Not just at the sow farm, but at the grow finish. Really, that's the advantage.
Sure.
That
I think that's really important that we continue to emphasize the burden of the cost of disease when it comes to things like PRRS. And we have some of that information, but I know that there are systems like Pipestone and others that are developing more and more of analytic data that's going to really identify that. And for those that are saying we have to live with this, I believe putting those numbers in front of them and comparing those numbers is critical if they're going to stay in business. They need to figure out how to get rid of this virus, or they're not going to be business 10 or 15 years from now. That's where I think
not only the dollar impact. I think there's a emotional burden here. There's and that results in staff turnover. When in animal welfare, when you have a sow farm turn PRRS positive, what's changed, I think, at least in my career, my observation is it used to be depopulation of the sow farm was never very high on the list, if on the list at all, of interventions. Well, now it's beginning to rise to a top consideration. And I think for two primary reasons. One is the financial burden, Tom and Scott and Monse. But second is this fatigue, right? The fatigue knowing, and the other way the virus has changed is it's longer now to eliminate. And so do I really, when an owner and a staff sits down and says, do I really want to live with this for now 1 year? The decision is a lot easier saying, I think it's easier to depopulate the sow farm, eliminate the spread of the virus. And that's a change, I think, in the national attitude towards this virus and should be communicated and educated more clearly.
And you combine that with new knowledge, this whole business on area spread, our publications that came out in 2024. So a lot of this is really new, that we showed that for 3 years, we can keep incidence to a very low level across a large production system. It's never been shown before. And that's not all. I don't think everybody knows about that, because it is basically brand new information. And so if people haven't had a chance to really digest that and talk about it with their vet or with their producers, and that is an important piece that needs to continue to be relayed and shared and talked about and rediscussed.
I think that's right, Scott. The look at the body of knowledge now, right? And that's new knowledge you're referring to. And if the one thing we can do is simply to educate our industry and our producers on that body of knowledge, and especially the new knowledge, to maybe change the culture of the national industry in regards to this pathogen.
My father-in-law has made this comment just this last year again, and bless his soul, he's in his early 90s now. He said, I'm not going to die until the Vikings win the Super Bowl. I think we can say that may not happen again this year, but I would love to say the same thing about the PRRS virus, that I'm not going to pass on until we see this virus come to an end in the United States. I think that still is an admirable goal for us to achieve.
Or at least get on a pathway to eliminate it, Tom. Yeah. I think that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Scott, I know we want to get wrap up here soon, but we talk about this next generation biosecurity, but I think we still think about sow farms. And again, I think about area spread and I think about grow finish, honestly. So what would be the key takeaways from the next generation biosecurity for grow finish? Help us understand that part, because we don't filtrate, for instance, grow finish. Mm-hmm. But grow finish play such an important role on PRRS epidemiology. What would be the key ones?
For sure. Well, if you do the things right in the sow farm, you can. The grow finish is not nearly the risk that it is. So you have to start at the sow farm, and you have to do what we've been talking about. But you're right, we do have to continue to work on grow finish. You brought that idea up many years ago. I remember when we were in Minnesota together. And I know there's a little bit of movement there, but to me, there's really too much research that's being done looking for different things. I think we already have the answers we need for grow finish. We know how it moves around with people, mm-hmm. We know how it moves around with trucks. And we just got to start there. We know what to do. We just have to implement and try to reduce infections as a grow finish. But I don't think there's any rocket science. I don't think we'll be filtering. But probably won't even be using feed additives. Get a lot cheaper. But people and trucks, we can do something there.
Exactly, Scott. The trucks is a very obvious. Just simply wash the trucks. I mean, look at Denmark. Every truck crossing their international border is washed. Yet we in the United States still don't wash all our market trucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to me that's a key message here. If we want to make progress on disease control in general, washing trucks, yes. it should be must. And actually, I also think people movement, even though we say we mm-hmm. change clothes, when it comes down to grow finish, I think there is an area of opportunity there in terms of how we access the farms, what we bring with us, just some of that basic biosecurity. And maybe that's one of the take-home message, right? I mean, focus on those indirect routes of transmission. Do what you can do, but do it well. And
but the bottom line for our industry is what, Scott, you said. We got to keep eliminating the virus from the sow farms. I mean, if we can't, we're moving so many pigs into the corn belt from outside the corn belt that are PRRS positive pigs at weaning, and we've got to stop that. Without that happening, we're not going to get to where we want to be.
What we're learning about, high path avian influenza in the dairy industry, and it looks like that's just getting tracked around by people's boots, by infected animals, by trucks moving from multiple farms in a day. It's like old school. There's really you can't even call it biosecurity, mm-hmm. but it clearly shows a great example, mechanical risk that's another envelope single-stranded RNA virus. Yep. Like PRRS. It's very similar. We can learn a lot from watching what's happening to the dairy industry and applying it to the grow finish. I think it's very similar.
We certainly want to make sure we keep that high path away from the pigs, right? And if we do a good job implementing biosecurity's measure for PRRS, we certainly will be helpful for any of these other viruses. So I think that should be the take-home message here. Go back to the basics. Do what you can do, controlling the indirect routes of transmission.
Just look at the companies that are putting next generation in on their sow farms. They're seeing less PRRS. They're also seeing less PED. Mm-hmm. They're seeing less influenza. They're seeing less mycoplasma. And in China, as Gordon, as you know, you see less ASF. So this approach has got so many applications to other diseases of pigs beyond PRRS. So I think we have to start thinking, what else can we do with this information besides reduce our risk of infections? So it's got tremendous application for the industry.
So we'll leave it there then, Scott. I think that you summarized it well, that we need to focus on the next generation biosecurity, focus on doing what you can do, focus on the mechanical transmission, and hopefully once we have again another recording, we are able to talk about having less PRRS overall. So with that, Scott, thank you for joining us. See you next time at the meeting.
This episode is exclusively sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim. The views, opinions, or positions expressed are those of the speakers and may not reflect those of any other organization.